Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, attack helicopters, or however you might identify, who am I to say you're not? Welcome, thanks for joining me once again. Today we're dealing with people who are wrong on the interwebs, just for something different. I know it shocks the pants off you that people continue to be wrong on the interwebs, but they do. They continue to be recidivist offenders. They continue to be individuals like this boy here, calls himself physionic or something like that. He's a student, has no credentials of any kind whatsoever, and he likes to think of himself as scientifically competent and able to comment sensibly upon so-called science as that regards human nutrition, health outcomes, all that kind of thing. So let's hear it and put him right where he's wrong. Spoiler, boys and girls, before we start, I know it's going to shock you, but that is going to be, well, everywhere. Nicholas, all yours. Tell us about it.
Many people die because their heart just stops.
No. The heart stops for a reason. It doesn't just stop. I'm sick of being a heart now. I think I'll just stop. All of that. No, there's a reason why the heart stops, Nicholas. So good. Less than 3 seconds before you made your first fundamental error. It doesn't get better.
There are a variety of reasons for why our heart simply stops beating.
There you go. That's better.
Among the most common is the dreaded myocardial infarction.
Yes, a heart attack.
A heart attack. Unfortunately, many people die quite young from heart disease, like James Gandolfini, age 51, or comedian John Candy, age 43.
Did you notice that both of those individuals had something in common, Nicholas? But not everybody that dies of a heart attack has that particular presentation, shall we say. It's pretty common. There is a strong positive linear correlation between that presentation and that outcome. It would seem to be a covariate, a collinearity. It would seem to uncouple causalities. It would seem to be a real problem for you. Because your video is entitled, Why Your Low Carb Diet is Hurting Your Heart and How to Improve It. And then in brackets, live in studies. So a couple of things there. Number one, you are claiming that low carb diets are hurting my heart. Well, let's see whether you prove that that's the case in any way, shape or form whatsoever in your 14-minute and 15-second video. And secondly, whether or not you provide us with any way to improve it. We'll keep an eye on that as we progress. And look, if you can cover 11 different studies in any reasonable, sensible, competent detail whatsoever within the space of 14 minutes and 15 seconds, I will be very impressed, Nicholas. Spoiler, I've seen this already once and I'm not impressed. That's why I'm making this video. So stick around, everybody, and you'll learn something, I'm sure. Right, let's do some science. Off you go, Nicholas.
Along with many, many others. Granted, we don't know if they died from nutrition-caused heart disease.
Correct, of course we don't, because there are no cause and effect studies extant anywhere that would be able to inform us on that question. None.
But it does raise a question about our nutrition. Specifically, there has been a movement in higher fat diets, like the ketogenic diet. And I'd like to know if a high-fat diet can speed up our heart disease-caused mortality.
Well, in that case, you'll need to do an experiment, Nicholas, involving human beings, properly powered, properly designed, properly randomized, metabolic ward lock-in, at birth, kept in their respective labs, these genetically identical pairs of twins, many of them, to make sure you've got power, over their entire lifespan of probably 7 or 8 decades on average, some of them longer, some of them shorter, absolutely. Under complete strict observation and control for the entire time, because you just said cause. So you need to eliminate covariates, confounds, collinearities that could undercut and erode your ability to inform us on cause. Good luck getting that past an ethics committee. Do you have that kind of pull, or are you having a tremendous pull, Nicholas? I think my people know which one it is already. It's also interesting that you have PhD after your name and your email address, I think it was, that I saw just a few minutes ago. You don't have a PhD, Nicholas. You're a student. Okay? Right, what's next?
Unfortunately, I didn't know the answer because...
And neither does anybody else. There are no studies that can inform us on cause and effect as that relates to any hard health outcome in human beings over any period of time as that relates to any aspect of nutrition whatsoever. None.
You'll often hear cardiologists say things like this.
A keto diet is the best for your heart.
This one you can see by my face really, really angers me. I can't tell you how much time I spend in my practice debunking the myth that the keto diet is good for you.
Okay, well, number one, I've seen the video in full there that Nicholas has just played that short segment of. That woman is one of the most ignorant, ill-educated, incompetent, anti-scientific crackpots and charlatans I've seen in a long time. She has no idea what she's talking about whatsoever, in fact. She doesn't debunk a damn thing, in fact. And secondly, allopathic physicians are not trained in nutrition, Nicholas, at all. So who cares what her opinion is? Okay, what's next?
And yet, you also have other doctors.
Yes, well, still, allopathic physicians are not trained in nutrition. Now, this particular one, I respect greatly. I agree with almost everything he has to say on nutrition, and I say that from a position of authority in the field. Absolutely, without any question, runs on the board, academic CV above reproach in that regard. But I respect what he has to say because it is correct, not because he is an allopathic physician, because that's got nothing to do with his ability to speak the truth about nutrition. He's not trained in nutrition. As a physician, he has trained himself in nutrition subsequently, and he's got things right. Good for him. Love you, Ken. There's nothing you can do about it. What's next?
Saying a ketogenic diet is healthy for your heart. So you can imagine the confusion going around. Fortunately, I have a unique skill that allows...
No, you don't, Nicholas. You are a student. You're a student. Okay? Remember that?
...me to completely ignore what experts say.
Expert, you say. What's an expert? And who's to determine who is one? You, Nicholas? Are you competent to determine who an expert is? No, because you're a student. X is an unknown quantity and a spurt is a drip under pressure, by the way. Okay?
And rely exclusively on my own study analysis of it.
But Nicholas, you're a student without the skills to adequately, rationally, competently analyze a statistical inference given to you in a given scientific paper and communicate effectively in a robust way with utility to the public about what it says. We're about to show that. We're about to see that. Because you're about to make an attempt to do so and you're going to make a fool of yourself. You're going to make an absolute fool of yourself. It's going to be hilarious. Stick around, folks. You're going to love this. It's great.
Abilities. In doing so, I analyzed over 10 studies.
You've analysed over 10 studies. Number one, you don't have the skills to analyse studies, any number of them. And over 10, you say. Over 10. In fact, he's talking about 11 studies because it says so in brackets. One of them is a meta-analysis, which is not in and of itself a study. The other 10, well, we'll see what he says about them. And I wonder if he's going to do any of them justice in the remaining less than 13 minutes of his video. I doubt it. Well, I know he doesn't because I've seen it already. Stick around.
To come to the conclusions that you'll hear, and the conclusions might surprise you. Because they...
What surprises me, Nicholas, is that you imagine yourself competent to speak on this topic in any way, shape or form, because we're about to see you are not.
Disagree with both sides of the high fat.
Well, there's your second mistake, really, your second major mistake. But this isn't a us and them, this side and that side situation. There are a continuum of positions that people can take along a long pathway. Some of them are correct and robust and of utility to people, and some of them are not. Okay?
Disease debate. But before you roll your eyes and think, oh, not another opinion, let me assure you.
That's the thing about opinions, Nicholas. They are just like anal orifices. Most people have one, and mostly they're full of excrement, and yours definitely is.
That my stance is simply a more nuanced.
No, it isn't, Nicholas. You don't have the skills or the understanding to form a nuanced opinion. We're about to see that.
That I think the experts are missing.
The experts. What qualifies you to comment on what is being said by actually competent analysts on this topic, Nicholas. You're a student, remember? You have no credentials here. None.
Not an outright rebuttal of their stances. So, what's the deal with a high-fat diet and heart disease?
Well, we don't know. There are no studies that can inform us on that whatsoever. Not one. Anywhere.
Over a year and a half ago, I did a
How long ago, Nicholas? Tell us.
100 study analysis.
No, you didn't do a 100 study analysis, Nicholas. You don't have the skills to do an analysis. Not an appropriate, not a skilled, not a competent one. You wasted our time.
On the ketogenic diet across a multitude of health markers.
Oh, markers, you say? All right. Not actual health outcomes, the actual thing that's important. Oops.
So I could have started there, but I really wanted a big picture view before getting into a long list of isolated studies. That being the case, I found a meta-analysis.
Well, there you go. You wasted our time. This is a meta-analysis of prospective cohorts. Prospective cohorts can not inform on cause and effect, risk, likelihood, any of those things at all in any group of people going forward over any period of time under any circumstances whatsoever. Okay, we're done. Your video should be finished. 2 minutes and 17 seconds in. However, you still waffle on inanely for another nearly 12 minutes. Let's hear it. You're doing a great job though, son. Keep going.
Or a single analysis of many studies on the topic of dietary fat.
No, reported intakes of dietary fat. These are all prospective studies that rely entirely on respondent self-report. We're done. Sorry, no. Not fat intake at all. Reported fat intake. Quite different from actual fat intake.
And cardiovascular disease, heart disease. Now, I'll be the first to admit that this meta-analysis consisting of 19 studies was not performed using randomized controlled trials.
Right, so we're done, aren't we? We're finished. It's not science. It cannot inform on cause and effect, risk, hazard, or anything remotely connected to any of those things. We are done. Why aren't you done? Why are you still waffling on for another 11 and a half minutes? What can you possibly have to say?
It used longer-term prospective studies. That means the researchers focused their attention on studies that tracked people's nutrition.
No. Tracked what people said they were eating. Quite different.
Over time. And then...
No, usually in these studies, they ask the people once at the beginning, what's your diet look like? And never again do they ask them, has your diet changed over the last year, 5 years, 10 years? My word, son. You clearly have no idea what it is you're reading whatsoever, do you?
Assessed outcomes like heart attacks.
No. Well, they did assess outcomes like heart attack, but then they adjusted it. They adjusted what they observed to something they didn't observe. They made some stuff up. It's called fabrication. It's not science, Nicholas. Okay, it belongs in the fiction section. Scientists control the situation and report what they observed. Anti-scientists don't control anything, observe things, ignore what they observed, and report something that they made up instead. That's what these people have done. You missed it, somehow. Oh, maybe it's because you're a student and don't know anything about this. Okay.
After a certain amount of time had passed. In some cases, 20 or even 30 years later.
Yeah, and in other cases, not that long at all, in fact. So how do you compare a follow-up study where they follow people for 20 or 30 years versus one where they follow people for less than 5? How would you put them in the same analysis? How would you do that, Nicholas? Do you even know? I'm betting you don't.
But what I'm getting at here is that these studies offer us information on the association.
No, the reported association, once it's been adjusted, i.e. fabricated.
Between dietary fat.
No, between what people reported they consumed by way of dietary fat, not what they actually did.
And heart disease. But they do not have the power to indicate causation.
Well, there you go. We're done. There is no inference of utility here. This is a story about what might have happened in a fictitious group of individuals somewhere at some point. This is not a real outcome study because they did not report what was actually observed. They adjusted it. We are done, Nicholas. Still. You still aren't, for some reason.
AKA, this amount of dietary fat definitely
No, reported intakes.
causes heart disease. But this still sets up a good starting point for us.
No, it doesn't. The only thing that these studies are useful for is as hypothesis generating pilot work. Were there any possibility in the real world, in the universe, that we could ever possibly actually undertake an interventional study with human beings as subjects over the appropriate period of time, starting at birth, keeping them locked in labs under control and observation for the entire time, for their entire lives, to assess the cause and effect relationship between diet and outcomes? We can't do that. We never will be able to do that. We are done, Nicholas. Finish. Goodness sake, this isn't hard to understand, even if you only have 3 brain cells.
To get a big picture over time, and then we'll get into the more rigorous studies that do offer some types of conclusions.
There aren't any studies that offer any such thing. None at all. Not a damn one, Nicholas.
So this meta-analysis analyzed the amount of total dietary fat and the
No, it didn't. It analysed what people said they were eating. Remember?
relationship to cardiovascular disease.
No, and then they reported something different from what they actually observed in terms of the outcomes. Not science. Cool story. More emphasis on the dragons next time. Perhaps a bit less incest would be great. And an ending that doesn't... Oh, God. Write a better ending. Okay?
Heart disease.
I'll get over it one day, maybe.
So you should ask yourself, with a stepwise increase in dietary fat,
Well, you'd have to observe people under control and observation in a locked lab to know that they are indeed eating a certain amount of fat, Nicholas. Otherwise, forget it. People tell lies on surveys. Write that down. And then you've got the word risk there as well, which is completely inappropriate because these studies cannot inform on risk in any way. So no.
is there a connection with a higher incidence?
See how you said incidence there, not risk, when you had the word risk on the page there in the red box that you just had up? And it wasn't even incidence because it's adjusted. Fabricated, made up, fantasy.
Of cardiovascular disease. Looking at this graph, we see total fat intake.
No, we don't. We see reported total fat intake, and we also see absolutely nothing. Look at those 95% confidence intervals, the dotted lines, the one above and below the line that supposedly purports to be the middle of the potential range of outcomes in the population. In truth, if we were to look at an entire population of everybody. There is nothing to see here at all. Through the entire range, the 95% confidence interval spans across 1.0. Signal to noise ratio means there is nothing to see here whatsoever. And basically that's a, to all intents and purposes, flat line. Okay, we're done. No relationship exists between reported saturated fat intake and adjusted incidence of heart disease. That's a shame. It doesn't matter anyway because it's not science. What's next?
Is listed below, with it increasing as it moves more.
No. That's not what it shows, Nicholas.
To the right. On the vertical axis, we see the relative risk.
No, not risk. Remember, these studies can't inform on risk at all in any way.
Meaning the risk of
No, still.
cardiovascular disease compared to a low-fat diet. If the solid black line moves up,
Which it didn't.
the risk
No, still not risk. No,
increases. If it goes down, the risk
no, still.
reduces. And if it stays flat, there's no association.
Right. Which is what we have here. No association at all. None.
So it should be pretty clear to you now that as dietary fat
No, not risk. Adjusted, fabricated, made up incidents. Still,
increases, there's no shift in risk.
Right, no. This doesn't inform on risk in any way, one way or the other.
So this means there's no association between the total dietary fat intake
As reported, not as actually consumed.
amount and cardiovascular disease deaths. Okay, that's pretty interesting.
No, it isn't. That was a waste of time. And it shows your absolute destitution of competence to even understand what you're looking at on a chart, Nicholas. What's next?
But we're going to go deeper.
Oh, are you? Good. Should we wait for that? Go on then. You're doing a great job, son. Keep going.
About the type of fat, so saturated and unsaturated
Well,
fat.
great. That would require you to have kept people under lock and key, under observation to know what kind of fat they really were eating. Did you do that? No? I thought not.
Here, following the same rules, we're looking at
What rules exactly are we following thus far? I didn't see any. Exactly what rules are you talking about, Nicholas?
saturated fat intake.
No, reported. See how the 95% confidence interval throughout almost the entire range is either very close to spanning one or in fact spanning one. It's not a linear dose-response relationship, ergo there is no causality at play here. This is a coincidental variable. And there's nothing to see here because the signal-to-noise ratio is so vast, so huge that we don't know even which direction the change in incidence might be in the entire population. That's what the 95% confidence interval gives us an indication of. Nothing to see here either, Nicholas. Waste of time. Complete waste of time.
Clearly, we see a shift upward.
No, we don't. No. See how the 95% confidence intervals show us that it's entirely possible that really there's almost no change whatsoever, because you have to take the lower bound as a possibility in terms of what the reality of the situation is in the population at large. You haven't done that, Nicholas. Ergo, you've made the most basic fundamental error possible in interpretation of this data set. That's the point of having the 95% confidence interval there, so a competent scientist can judge the veracity of this empirical inference, which is no inference. Notice also after that it drops away, ergo not a dose-response relationship, ergo not a cause and effect relationship across the range, ergo of no value anyway. I mean, look at that. It shows me that it's entirely, almost certain, in fact, that if I eat 19-20% saturated fat, that my risk, if you believe this is able to inform on risk, is lower than if I eat 3%. There you go, boys and girls. Take that one home and put it in your pipe and smoke it or whatever you want to do with it.
Word, which means
Or just ignore it as a complete waste of time because it's just nonsense. It's just rubbish, Nicholas.
an associated increased carb.
No, there you go again. No, not at all. These studies cannot inform on risk, and this chart doesn't inform on risk, even if they could, because the 95% confidence interval is so vast. Signal-to-noise ratio. We're done. What's next?
Vascular disease death risk.
No, not risk. No.
But while the effect does persist as saturated fat intake
No, because look at the lower bound. It shows that it might well be declining. In fact, it's wrong again.
increases, the effect seems to plateau. We'll come back to that.
Well, that'll be exciting. Can't wait for that.
Are all fats created equal, though?
No, they're not.
How about fats that we might find in olive oil, monounsaturated fat?
But olive oil also contains a significant amount of polyunsaturates as well, Nicholas. So if you're going to look at such a thing, even if it was a cause and effect relationship, which this isn't that we're looking at, remember this is a study of what people said they were eating versus incidence of something that actually wasn't the incidence because it's been adjusted, fabricated. Remember that? Yeah, this is just rubbish. But even if it was able to do that, which one? Was it the monounsaturates or the polyunsaturates that have had the effect? If this was a cause and effect, because there are two variables free to vary here and to have had an effect on our outcome. There is no control being exerted here. Whoops. Science requires us to control things, Nicholas. When you're a scientist one day, you'll understand that. As it is at the moment, though, son, you're a student, and probably that's what you should do. You should focus on being a student, get your studies done. Okay?
Yes. We see a similar effect as with sex.
No, we don't. See, effect is a conjugate of cause. Cause and effect is a statement of cause and effect, explicitly, because you just said effect. No. Look at this. 95% confidence intervals, nothing to see here. Spans 1 across the entire range. This could easily be a flat line from left to right, horizontal without deviation from 1.0. There is no relationship here at all that we can hang our hat on or anything else. Let's move on.
Saturated fat, but in the reverse direction.
No, there's no direction indicated here, Nicholas, at all, because the 95% confidence interval renders this data set unable to inform us on direction of any kind. It could be a flat line. See, it's within the 95% confidence interval across the entire range. You cannot discount that possibility. We are done here.
A reduced risk.
No, not risk. This doesn't inform on risk at all, still.
Yet, polyunsaturated fats, the association is robust.
No, it isn't. Look at those 95% confidence intervals. Still, they span 1 across the entire range. It could be a flat line across the entire range from left to right, horizontal, no deviation from 1.0. We're done here.
And follows a linear trend.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. Look at those confidence intervals. It could be a flat line across entirely, horizontal, no deviation from 1. That cannot be discounted as a possibility in this data set. That's what the confidence intervals are for, Nicholas, to tell us how robust what we purport to observe, even though we haven't because this is adjusted, might say. And you don't understand that because you don't have the skills to understand that because, let me think, you're a student. Nothing wrong with being a student. It's a great thing to be. But when you're a student, what you should actually do is use this thing and these things in the same proportion to what they exist on your body. Okay? What's next?
Downwards.
No.
Indicating an even stronger
No.
association with
No, not at all. False.
reduced cardiovascular disease, death risk.
No. Absolutely not. Wrong. Completely incompetent statement. No.
We'll discuss this again later as well.
Well, that'll be exciting. How much later is there left? You've spent 5 minutes and 30 seconds of your 14-minute and 15-second video wasting our time. You now have not very much time left to do justice to the other 10 studies which you claim to be much more robust. Good luck, son. I wonder if he's going to get it done.
Okay, that's all pretty fascinating in its own.
No, it isn't. It's a waste of time, and you're an idiot.
Right? But there's something else about this analysis that caught my eye, and it's
Why? Why did you bother looking more than 2 seconds? Because if you were competent, you'd go, prospective cohort study. Not science. That's what you would have done.
something I'd like to point out to you.
Go
The
on.
researchers broke up the studies according to where they were performed. So of those eligible for analysis, 4 studies were US-based, while 3 were Asia-based, and 2 more were Europe.
Guess what I'm going to say? You're right.
And when reanalyzing the association of saturated fat,
You mean the association of reported saturated fat and the reported association, because the association itself was in fact fabricated, did not reflect what was actually observed in terms of actual raw data incidence. Remember that? No, we've forgotten that again, clearly. Okay.
the data indicates a stronger risk.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't indicate risk of any kind, one way or the other, under any circumstances. Absolutely not, Nicholas. No. Risk is a cause and effect statement. These studies cannot inform on that. False.
Association in the United States studies, and a weaker association in the Asian and European studies. So my question to you is, why do you think that is?
My answer is, who gives a rip-roaring rat's rear end? This is an entirely wasted period of time, other than grist for our humour mill and educational services being supplied to my people who are laughing at you, Nicholas. They are laughing at your destitution of competence. They are laughing at your Dunning-Kruger and your very, very serious ego problem. your inability to grasp your position in the world as a student who knows nothing about this at all.
Now, I did promise we'd color in some of the details.
Oh, good. Well, I'm still waiting for that because you've now got 8 minutes left in your video to cover 10 different studies in any kind of detail to do them any kind of justice. I wonder if he's going to get that done.
Some more rigorous cause
Rigorous, you say. Let's hear it.
effect type research. So I'm going to pull in 10 studies that
Oh, great. Let's hear it.
randomly place people into low carbohydrate, high fat diets.
How low and how high? Give us the numbers, Nicholas. We're waiting for the numbers. Where are the numbers? Because you'll notice a lot of these studies that purport to be about low carbohydrate diets, when you go and read the thing, you'll find out that the low carbohydrate diet is anything but. So you're going to provide us with that information out of these 10 studies? No? Oh, that's what I thought.
To be compared against a high carbohydrate diet.
Oh, well, how high is high? Same question, really, same point.
Or against themselves at an earlier time point.
Oh, right, so time is not a covariate. Time is not a collinearity. Of course it is. Sake.
It'd be ideal for me to go into all the details of each study.
Well, it would. If you want to talk about studies, Nicholas, it would be ideal if you actually told us what was in them and made a competent assessment of what they said. What would be even better is if you're a student, which you are, you should go and do that rather than spouting off your mouth ignorantly to people about something that you don't know anything about whatsoever. That'd be better.
Baseline values, statistical analyses.
Anyone that thinks maybe this kind of thing pisses me off, you got it. It does. Who do you think you are, child? This is ridiculous. Carry on.
Study design and more. But unless we'd like to be here for a few hours, I'm going to have to do away with
any kind of rigor or actually assessing the things at all. We just got to take your untrained, unqualified, vacuous opinion on board, do we, Nicholas? Why would we do that? For what reason?
all of that and highlight the main points.
The main points, you say? According to whom?
Now, it's impossible for studies that last days to months to have endpoints such as heart attacks.
Correct. Ergo, you're still wasting our time, aren't you, son? Absolutely, completely.
Each diet. Just imagine pitching this idea. Hey, our hypothesis is that a ketogenic diet causes heart attacks.
Well, good. Then do a study that can prove that. Or shut up. And it's going to be the second one because you can't do that study.
Okay. Any volunteers for the ketogenic diet?
Yes, I've been on one for 27 years so far. Quite happy to continue there.
So we have to use proxy measures that are reliably linked
No, there are no proxy measures reliably linked to anything, Nicholas.
to heart disease.
No, you cannot assert someone's risk, likelihood, or anything of any outcome of any kind by doing a short-term study looking at proxy measures. Any more than you do it using a prospective cohort study that controls nothing. There is no science on this topic, Nicholas. None. That is the competent assessment. That is the only competent assessment. There is no science that can inform. For goodness sake, this isn't hard to grasp.
Unfortunately, here is where some people will push back because this introduces a new variable that we have to vet for its accuracy at predicting our main outcome of interest, heart disease.
Right, so you're back to prospective cohort studies again, which control nothing, are confounded with covariates, collinearities, etc. We are done, Nicholas.
Many studies implicate blood cholesterol levels.
No, there aren't any studies that implicate any such thing. They purport to, they fail absolutely to do so. Simple.
The strongest links attributed to ApoB containing lipoproteins.
So what? There's also a very, very strong link associatively between the sale of ice creams at Miami Beach and sunburn suffered by people at Miami Beach that day. Does that mean the cause of sunburn is ice cream sales, Nicholas? No. What's next?
So I can't derail the conversation of dietary fat and heart disease risk by going.
You can't inform on risk because there is no science to inform you on risk either way in any amount. Still.
To the literature on the link between ApoB and heart disease risk. So I'll link.
Fire crews are associated very, very highly with major forest fire events. Ergo, in order to deal with the forest fire scourge, we need to outlaw fire crews, do we, Nicholas? What about drownings in swimming pools, as that associates with movies released starring Nicolas Cage? Because there's a strong, very strong relationship there too, empirically. Should we ban movies by Nicolas Cage? I think so. But not because it will have any effect on drownings in swimming pools. Okay?
Some studies and leave it.
Sorry, Julian.
With a promise that I'll visit the issue in other content.
All right, so you're just going to waffle inanely, say the wrong thing completely, incompetently, lead people up the garden path, and promise to say something about it later. You've just spent 7 minutes and 55 seconds talking about non-science without giving us the actual competent assessment of that non-science, which is A, it's not science, and B, it is not capable of informing on risk in any way at all. And now you have about 6 or so minutes left in your video in which you're going to tell us about 10 studies which are rigorous. Good luck, son.
Assuming you trust the majority of scientists.
Trust the science. That's a good idea. Is anybody in the world that stupid? Apparently many of them are. Many of them. It's incredible.
Aren't completely wrong.
See, the thing is, here's the thing about science. Questioning the science, testing the science, is precisely how you do science. Okay? Wow. What's next?
About the ApoB link, I should probably at least explain what it is before going on.
Why? It has no bearing on cause and effect.
Further. Okay, so your blood cholesterol is packaged into these vehicles, these vessels called lipoproteins.
Wow, so he's going to waste our time with this, thus reducing still further the amount of time he's going to spend on these so-called 10 much more rigorous studies. Incredible, Nicholas. I'm fascinated to see how much you actually have to say about these 10 rigorous studies that absolutely prove what you say in the title of your video, which is that you're saying your low-carb diet is hurting your heart. I'm still waiting for anything that would suggest to me that that is so in any way. Are you going to get to that at all? You're also going to tell us how to improve it in this video. You're running out of time, son.
They come in different sizes and densities, and that's why you might see LDL or low density lipoprotein and HDL or high density lipoprotein, among others. They circulate through our blood and they serve a variety of functions. But scientists have determined that people with the highest risk of heart disease.
No, scientists have not determined anything about risk of heart disease in human beings as that relates to cholesterol or any of the lipoproteins or any aspect of human nutrition in any way, Nicholas. Still, they have not determined any such thing. No.
Tend to have higher levels of low-density lipoprotein.
Yes, and also scientists have determined that people who eat ice cream are also very much more likely to suffer sunburn that day. So what?
Or LDL. So your doctor will look at your LDL levels to determine.
No, they actually don't do that either, Nicholas. Do you understand how LDL is? I'm not even going to say measured because it isn't. That's the point. They estimate it. They don't measure LDL in a standard blood lipid test, Nicholas. They guess as to what it is. It's a guess with an error range around it. Whoops.
Determine your potential risk.
No, nothing to do with risk. Still, your doctor cannot inform you on your risk by looking at how much LDL there is in your blood. Sorry, can't be done.
That's why it's considered a proxy marker. Still, researchers have also determined that a particular protein found on these lipoprotein vessels is a stronger indication than just LDL.
A stronger indication of what, Nicholas? Of nothing at all.
That's because LDL has an ApoB protein tag.
So?
But its cousins also do, like VLDL, IDL, and so on.
So
ApoB is a better representation of all these cholesterol-containing lipoproteins.
So they're not associated in a cause and effect fashion with atherosclerosis heart disease. Ergo, the information is of no utility whatever.
And it tracks even better with heart disease.
So what? Association does not inform on causality, no matter the strength of the association. We are done. Still.
The question raised then is, how do dietary fats affect these proxy markers of heart disease risk?
Well, do you have some experimental studies that can tell us? And even if you do, so what? These are proxy measures of so-called risk. They're nothing of the sort. They're associates. They cannot inform on risk. They are not cause and effect mechanisms, Nicholas. Still.
Risk.
No, not risk. Not risk at all. Wrong again.
Previously, we saw no association between the amount of dietary fat
as reported
and heart disease risk.
No, not risk at all. Incidence as reported once it's been adjusted from what it actually was. Fabricated.
But if we look at the intervention studies, we see something peculiar.
Well, depends on what you potentially view personally as being peculiar or not. I'll tell you what I find very peculiar is students without any credential background in science whatsoever making videos about science as if they know something about science when they don't. That's peculiar. I wonder how that started, other than you're part of a generation that was brought up to believe that your opinion is valid too, even though it's not, and that every child should win a prize.
In 4 studies, a ketogenic nutrition...
4 whole studies? Mm-hmm.
Or near ketogenic nutrition.
Right, so then bugger off. Oh, my God. Wow.
So usually less than 10% of your diet coming from carbohydrates.
Well, that's not a low carbohydrate diet at all.
Sometimes much less. Led to...
That's the whole point, though. Much less is what's required. Much less than 10%. Closer to 0, with an absolute ceiling of 50 grams of total carbohydrate, Nicholas. Is that what these studies did? Because if not, get out of here. You're wasting our time again.
An increase in low-density lipoproteins.
So, if you look at the association between all-cause mortality and all sub-causes of mortality as well, as that relates to total cholesterol, ergo to the proportion of that total cholesterol, which actually is LDL, if in fact LDL was ever measured, which it isn't, you'll find that the association is that the lower you drop the cholesterol below 220 milligrams, the higher the risk of death, or incidence, I should say, of death from all causes and from every single major sub-cause as well, Nicholas. That's an inconvenient association for you, isn't it, son? Whoops, what's next?
Or LDL. In yet another study, ApoB levels increased.
So, same argument, associate.
So that accounts for half of the studies on hand.
That's it? That's your competent scientific assessment of half your studies on hand? Wow!
Which might be concerning.
But it isn't though, Nicholas, because you've given us absolutely nothing of substance to go on whatsoever.
But it's actually much rather confusing than anything, because the other 5 studies indicate either no change in cholesterol or a reduction.
Right, so your 10 more rigorous studies are all about a proxy measure that has no causal relationship with heart disease whatsoever. Wow. 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 Ted, what do you think?
What, are you retarded?
That's what I thought you'd say.
At this point, I wouldn't blame you if you were scratching your head thinking, how can we come to any conclusions if studies are all over the place?
Well, we can't, Nicholas. That's the point. That's where we started, and that's where we're going to finish. And you have had no impact on that of any kind either way. You have wasted our time entirely.
Well, for that, we need to break things up a bit more and get into some of the finer details that I feel.
Well, you've got less than 4 minutes left in your video, Nicholas, to deal with any finer details of any one of those 10 studies. Good luck, son.
Many experts fail to do.
Experts again. Don't forget the experts.
Remember, our meta-analysis
Showed nothing whatsoever and was of no utility or value at all, whatever. Good.
indicated increased risk
No, it didn't. It did no such thing, remember? False. Again.
with the consumption of saturated
No. Reported consumption.
fat. So what if we take that information and
There's no information there, Nicholas. Did you not see the graph we've just seen? Did you not look at those 95% confidence intervals? Clearly not, because you don't understand what they are. Because you're a student, remember?
apply it here? All of those 5 studies that showed increased concentration of heart disease risk
No, they didn't. None of them showed anything of the sort. Still,
factors like LDL
no, that's not a risk factor. No. False.
and ApoB,
No. False.
all of them used a low carbohydrate, high fat diet that was high in saturated fat.
So,
Now, that alone might seem like it explains a lot,
no, it doesn't explain a damn thing, Nicholas. Nothing at all.
but it doesn't quite satisfy things
It
because
doesn't satisfy anything. It's waffle from you, son.
some of the studies that did not see an increase in any of the measures of cholesterol also consumed a high saturated fat diet.
So,
Take, for example, this study, wherein participants consumed over 35% of their fat and saturated fat, and
so,
yet their total and LDL cholesterol did not budge.
so,
Again, you can imagine that someone might look at all this information and think this is utterly and hopelessly confusing.
or they could understand that there is no inference here anywhere in the so-called nutritional, so-called science that can inform us in any way, either way, on risk of any outcome over any period of time in human beings as that relates to any aspect of human nutrition. Then there's no confusion. Straightforward. That's what a responsible scientist does. They say we do not have anything to go on here within this area of endeavor, this so-called nutrition science. We have to get information about what is likely to be the best diet for a human being from outside of this area in the actual hard sciences, like comparative anatomy and physiology, metabolic pathway studies, the anthropology, etc. That's where you go for your answers, Nicholas. All right?
But not so, my friend. We need to peel back 2 more layers.
Oh my God, really? You haven't peeled back a single layer yet?
Of the studies that seem to be immune to increasing cholesterol levels with high saturated fat,
And so, still, cholesterol levels are no indication of likelihood of any outcome of any kind. Except, it would seem that the largest data set available anywhere on the planet would suggest that if you lower your cholesterol below 220 milligrams per deciliter, that's associated with a precipitous increase for every milligram lower than 220 in terms of your incidence of death from all causes and from all of, or each of the sub-causes as well. That's an association like any other. That's not cause and effect either, but that's the inference we're looking at. Billions and billions of person years of follow-up there. 168 countries and territories. Okay.
Consumption, all of them led to significant weight loss.
So, other than weight loss is a likely mechanistic reducer of someone's likelihood, that's demonstrable of having heart disease. There are reasons why being overweight will lead cause and effect to an increase in your likelihood of heart disease. Not so of cholesterol. Not so of any nutritional intake whatsoever.
So it seemed to me as I was reading these that a high-fat diet with large amounts of saturated fat can be negated from increasing cholesterol and heart disease metrics by simply losing sufficient weight loss concomitantly.
So confounds, collinearities, covariates, nothing to see here, no science. Good.
Yet, the degree of weight loss needs to be quite substantial because those studies that showed only a modest weight loss of a few kilograms still experienced increases in LDL.
So what? Still.
But I did tease there were two more layers, not just one.
Oh, God. Does this ever end?
So I believe the degree of weight loss is one layer that experts miss.
Who cares what you believe, Nicholas? You're a student. Your belief structure is not based on experience or knowledge in the field. You have no credentialing here whatsoever. Still.
Because it seems to overpower the saturated fat effect.
There is no effect. Effect is the conjugate of cause. There are no cause and effect studies. Still.
Then the second layer is to look at unsaturated fats.
Ooh.
As a reminder,
God, that swallowing, Nicholas, is really, really distracting. You need to deal with that in your videos. Edit that sound out, for goodness sake.
we saw reduced risk.
No, we didn't. Still. No. Straight line, left to right. 0 is a possibility. No variation from 0 is a possibility here. See that? Look at the 95% confidence interval. Still.
With unsaturated fat
No, we didn't see any such thing. False.
consumption in our meta-analysis.
No, we didn't. No.
Fascinatingly, this holds true in all of the randomized control trials as well.
No, it doesn't. Because none of them looked at hard health outcomes of any kind. Over any period of time whatsoever.
Of the studies that instructed participants to fill their total fat with much more unsaturated fats,
And did they then lock them in a lab and observe them and make sure that they complied? Or did they just leave them off on their own recognizance to live in their own houses and do their own thing? And say, oh, yes, researchers, I absolutely complied. Of course I did.
all of them experienced either improved cholesterol.
What is that? What is improved cholesterol? Because if you're going to tell me that reductions in cholesterol is an improvement, that shows you don't understand anything, Nicholas, at all, which we already knew based on this video thus far. It's been pretty clear how little you understand on any topic.
Or at the very least, no increase in LDL cholesterol.
So what? Still.
This was further compounded when participants lost weight.
So
this told me, at long last,
no, that doesn't tell you anything, Nicholas, at all, still. And you have a minute and 1 second left to convince me that my low-carb diet is hurting me somehow and that you know how I should improve it somehow. Thus far, you're getting an F. Repeat the course. Come back next semester and have another go, because you've done no such thing or got anywhere near it. You've shown an absolute destitution of competence. You've shown arrogance beyond belief in making this video at all. You've shown a complete lack of self-awareness of your own place in the world and your own level of incompetence. You are a very, very serious sufferer of Dunning-Kruger. You have no place and no business making videos on YouTube of an instructional nature about any aspect of human nutrition or science or anything remotely connected to any of those topics, Nicholas. No business doing that at all. You're an absolute joke. How are you going to sum up and finish off, though? Let's see.
Some details that everyone has been missing.
Oh, right. Everyone's been missing it. You've got it. Right. Okay. What is it, Nicholas? What have we missed?
As I mentioned at the beginning, experts seem to split on high-fat diets.
No, they don't.
But I feel that may be because they haven't gotten granular with the data and teased out.
Like you did in this video, Nicholas. Oh, my word. My word. Yes, Nicholas understands the data. Clearly he does. Oh, thanks for the laughs. It's great therapy.
Out the inconsistencies. As such, this data indicates to me that a high-fat diet can increase the levels of heart disease-related metrics.
How? How did you get to that conclusion? Based on exactly what? Because you haven't shown us any data that can show us anything whatsoever in that regard. Not a damn thing. Wow!
Such as LDL and ApoB.
Neither of those are metrics that are connected with heart disease cause and effect in any way, shape, or form.
If one were to consume it with high degrees of saturated fat. However, that may not be the case if the diet is focused on unsaturated fat.
That's the great thing about the word may, Nicholas. It leaves the other thing entirely on the table. Maybe not too. And the fact that you said may informs us in no way, shape, or form on which is more likely at all. And neither has any of the data that you've presented, because none of that's able to inform us in any way on the outcomes that we're talking about here. Heart disease. None of it. Okay?
And beyond that, regardless of the diet makeup, weight loss during the weight loss phase can overcome any negative heart health effects detailed.
A heart health effects, you say. Again, that's a hard outcome. It's a conjugative cause. Where are your studies to inform us on any of that, Nicholas? Besides absent. Like your competence, like your self-awareness of your position in the world, like more than about 3 or 4 brain cells, Nicholas, frankly. You're an embarrassment to yourself, to your family. Your parents must be proud. They're probably also very closely related, I would imagine. Incredible. Absolutely stunning. Right, finish off.
Here. With all that broken down, I certainly recommend checking out another video of mine.
So, you were going to tell me why my low-carb diet is hurting my heart. Remember at the beginning of this video, that was the title. What have you told me that I could hang my hat on there in that regard? Anything at all? Absolutely nothing, Nicholas. Nothing whatsoever. Neither have you told me how to improve it at all. You're not even going to get an F. You're going to get a Z. You're going to be excluded from even attempting to repeat the course next semester. Because it's not fair to take your money off you again, because you'll fail again. Z is what that's called. You're out of here. Right, the rest of you, you're out of here too. Get out. I've spent enough time with you already today. I've enjoyed it though. I hope you have too. Join me next time when someone else will be wrong on interwebs. Because it doesn't look like slowing down anytime soon, does it? In the meantime, enjoy this musical interlude from Vivaldi, The Four Seasons. This is the first movement. It's called Spring. 2, 3, 4.